The finishing crane. Quite a big crane. It had to be big because it lifted big things. Of course, it's not in Springburn, but it has very strong links with Springburn because locomotives that were built in Springburn were transported through the streets of Glasgow on low loaders to the foot of that crane and other cranes and docks in this area, lifted aloft and placed on ships bound for all over the world. Springburn was a very special place. At one time, about a quarter of all the locomotives in the world were made in Springburn. So what happened? What happened to Springburn to turn it from an area with a buoyant economy where everybody had money to spend into one of the most deprived areas in the UK? Well, this is Sighthill Cemetery. I don't believe it's actually in Springburn. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think the boundary kind of sits on Springburn Road there. You've got the St Rollox Works, or what used to be the St Rollox Works, on the other side of that road. It's in Springburn. I don't think Sighthill Cemetery is, but you get a good view from the very top of this. It sits on a little hill. View over a good bit of Glasgow, across the River Clyde to the south side of the city. And I think one of the main things that sort of sticks up is the Victoria Infirmary, or what's left of it. A rather grand and architecturally attractive old building. It was a hospital. Some of the good bits have unfortunately been demolished, and what's left, I believe, has been turned into housing. And perhaps there's some similarities there, because if we had been stood here maybe as late as 1980s or something like that, over in that direction we would have been able to see another grand building, the Barony Poorhouse at Barn Hill. They built a lot of these institutions very well in the old days, and unfortunately we don't seem to just give them the respect they should be due these days, because that building is gone. If I fade from an 1890s Ordnance Survey map to a modern satellite image, you'll see that it's all kind of modern housing now. It was in Springburn. You know, that's the problem with Springburn. There's really not that much of it left.
Springburn did not exist before the middle of the 19th century, when the Industrial Revolution saw the appearance of engineering works in the area. Before then, they were just farms and mansions scattered over a largely hilly terrain. The names of some of those properties live on in streets or district names, like Springvale, Cowlairs, Balgray and St Rollox, all of which can be seen in this map dating to 1795. It is said that Springburn was originally a weaving community. Well, that may well have been the case, but there is no mention of the word Springburn on any map right up to the early 1850s, and it's only in the First Ordnance Survey map of 1857 that Springburn appears, along with a whole load of industries. But even then, the Springburn of that date was located on the north of the Sighthill Branch Railway, which itself was established just a few years earlier, while the community on the south of that rail line was called Springvale. There is therefore no doubt that Springburn only grew to provide a workforce for all those industries. The main industries that first appeared were the Cowlairs Works and the Caledonian Railway Company Works, the latter a bit further south at St Rollox, and both clearly visible in that 1857 map. Cowlairs Works was actually established about a decade earlier, in 1841, so although we cannot see any mention of the word Springburn before 1857, it seems highly likely that properties were built to accommodate workers from that early date. Indeed, the 1857 map shows Cowlairs cottages, no doubt built for workers, and not far from a site that would later, in 1863, become Cowlairs Railway Village. By the 1890s, there was a plethora of industries. In addition to the Cowlairs Works, then under ownership of the North British Railway, and the St Rollox Works owned by the Caledonian Railway, you had the Hydepark Locomotive Works and the Atlas Engineering Works. These were the four main companies responsible for placing Springburn on a very high pedestal as far as locomotive manufacture was concerned. You only have to look at an 1890s map to see the many rail tracks leading to and from these works, and to appreciate just how important they were to the railway industry. But there were other industries springing up in the general area, like the Saracen Foundry, the St Rollox Chemical Works, the Campbellfield Pottery, Springburn Brickworks, Springvale Oil and Grease Mills, Milton Chemical Works, and so on. The population of Springburn grew rapidly, and with this growth came services for the community like a police service and fire service. Springburn was on the rise. On that 1890s map, we see quite clearly the Cowlairs Railway Village on the other side of the railway line from Cowlairs Works, and with its own allotment gardens. This was a sizable village, designed by Andrew Heaton and built in 1863. It was a very attractive development, in a baronial style with towers and crow-stepped gables, and stonework that looks as solid as a rock. Yet it was demolished in 1967. Could we not have carried out improvements to the properties without demolishing them? In its place is yet more bland modern housing. What a loss.
This is where the Cowlairs Works used to be, just behind me. Occupied a vast area between Carlisle Street and the railway line, and there's nothing left of it. The whole site's been, I think, desolate for quite a few years now. As late as the 1960s, they still maintained steam locomotives on this site. Today, all that is left is that stone pillar which used to sit beside the gatehouse. The gatehouse was right there, along with, I think, a storehouse just on the other side of it. And you can see that gatehouse and that stone pillar in a photograph dated to 1966, taken by John R. Hume. Well, this is where Springburn Cross used to be. And although you sort of sense that that might have been the case given the number of roads that meet here, you also kind of wonder, because it feels a bit like, feels a little bit lost and off the main drag. As a cross, it would have been traffic flowing from all directions. In an 1890s map, you can see this cross and you can see the letters DFN. They stand for drinking fountain. Used to be a little drinking fountain here. It was moved in, I think it was 1981, to the shopping centre, where it sits there. And of course, like a lot of fountains, there's no water involved these days, which is a shame.
Standing here, we can see that a row of tenements has survived. And that's about all. These tenements once had shops at ground level, but they've gone, and folk now go to the shopping centre by the waterless fountain. If we look at this postcard dating to around 1900, we can see those same tenements and all the shops. On the right of the photo are more tenements, and all that remains is a smaller building at the corner, which still stands, along with the railings at the top, but now a mere shadow of its former self. For shops these days, in addition to the shopping centre, many folk probably visit supermarkets like Lidl and Tesco, the latter located in the grounds of what used to be the Rollox Works, which continue to be involved with the railway industry up until 2019, just a few years ago. In addition to shops at ground level, many tenements also had pubs, often at a corner. This photo dates to around 1900 and shows Quinn's Bar at 726 Springburn Road, at its junction with Balgry Hill Road. It's a lovely shot of old Springburn, and you might wonder if the pub still exists and what does it look like today?
Well, you'd never know it to look at it today, but that pub used to be behind me, more or less under where the flyover is now. You can sort of sense the slope in the ground, and you can perhaps, with a lot of imagination, imagine the road going uphill there. But there's no pub, no tenement that it used to be in, and no church. There used to be a church there in this area, and it's probably largely because of the road alignment in the 1980s. I think it was about 3 churches or something that were just got rid of. I'm not a religious person, but even God doesn't stand in the way of progress.
Here we see a photo of another corner pub, this time the Boundary Bar, where Eastfield Street meets Springburn Road. It's a pretty stunning old photo, but where was it in the unrecognisable streets of the Springburn of today? Well, rather than me put in more footwork, let's just do a side-by-side image with an 1890s map on the left and a modern satellite image on the right. And that's where it was. Now a sloping bit of grass not far from the police station in an area that has changed beyond all recognition. When the pub was demolished, another Boundary Bar was created close by, but it too has gone.
Well, a little part of old Springburn that has survived. Built in 1909 as the main office complex for the Hydepark Locomotive Works, which used to sit just behind the camera over the road there. It's gone, it's just the office that's left here. I think it's been a college in later years. The Cowlairs Works wasn't far away, just over there, other side of the railway line, other side of that brand new white college thing there. You also had the Campbellfield pottery, also on this road just along there, again gone. But there's like a little untouched pocket of old Springburn, a little bit of cobbles on the road and a couple of old buildings that have survived. Come with me. This small part of Vulcan Street is like a little kind of hidden, untouched part of old Springburn. Still got cobbles in the road and the old lodge building there and the library. It's just a shame that at some point they felt the need to brick up the arched windows. It's a lovely building, it could be lovelier, but I'm sure they had a good reason for doing that. And in this photo dating to 1909, we actually see this building under construction. Not fully built, but there's a huge crowd of people. They're laying the foundation stone, which can still be seen in the front there. And there's folk hanging out of tenement windows behind it, and children clambering all over the library for a better look. That was some event.
But there's more to this little bit of cobble street. There's a famous photo showing a locomotive on a low loader being pulled through the streets by two steam traction engines. The photo dates to 1949, and that locomotive is heading for the finishing crane in a ship bound for Egypt. It's easy to identify exactly where the photo was taken, because if you look at the building on the left, yep, the library. That photo was taken right here, and the Hydepark Locomotive Works entrance used to be there, on Eyre Street, at the end of this cobbled road. Oh, how I wish I could have been there, right at that moment in time. But what actually happened to Springburn? Well, it lost all its heavy industry. They don't make trains in Springburn anymore, and the resulting mass unemployment clearly had a major impact. Springburn only grew to accommodate workers in the four main locomotive works, and when that industry died, there was no reason for Springburn to exist. There was also a need to regenerate and improve housing conditions, often with little thought as to how that might be done with existing stock so as not to change the character of an area too much. The destruction of Cowlairs Railway Village is a perfect example of a blinkered approach to regeneration, where demolition is the only solution being considered. Add to that massive road realignment in the 1980s that tore what was left of Springburn apart, and it's not hard to see why Springburn looks the way it does, i.e., nothing like it used to. What happened to Springburn is like a blueprint on how to utterly destroy a community. In 2012, as one of the most deprived areas in the UK, Springburn had around 50% more people than Glasgow who claimed unemployment benefits, 64% more young people than Glasgow who were neither in training, employment or education, 44% more children in poverty than Glasgow, 53% more people than Glasgow who lived within 500 metres of derelict land, and 40% more people than Glasgow who were in income deprivation. In Springburn, you're not expected to live as long as someone in Glasgow. The demolition of Springburn public halls in 2012, after lying derelict for 3 decades, was like the final nail in the coffin. Springburn had gone.
There's probably no greater demonstration of the decline of Springburn than here in Springburn Park. It was gifted to the people of Springburn by James Reid, one-time partner of the Hydepark Locomotive Works. I mean, it's pretty much a disgrace, you know. I think about the only thing the council would appear to do to maintain the park is cut the grass. I stay in Partick, which you might think of as the West End, and it's always strange the differences between the East End and the West End. For Victoria Park in the West End, it's a well-maintained park. They do nice things with flowers and stuff. This is the East End. It's a park that's run down. And I was talking to somebody the last time I was here, just a guy sitting on a bench, who said that if the council, Glasgow City Council, had their way, they would get rid of this park. A fine spot for some houses, I'm sure. I mean, You know, sometimes words fail me. Look at that Dalton Ware column behind me, surrounded by a rather unsightly wire fence. What's the fence going to keep trees off it? There's a flaming tree growing out the top of the thing. It used to be the centrepiece of a fountain in, I think it was Balgray Pleasure Park, which I'll show you on a map just now. Quite clearly see it, but like everything else in Springburn, it's gone now, buried under the 1980s road realignment. But they managed to obviously save this column, but they haven't saved it for that long because nobody clearly gives a monkeys about it other than sticking a fence around it. That tree growing at the top of it will eventually destroy it. Absolute disgrace. But it's really here that the skeletal remains of the once magnificent winter gardens in Springburn Park that we can truly appreciate the extent of Springburn's decline. And again, words just fail me. What happened to Springburn? What happened to the UK? I'm Eddie Burns. Take care.